Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a few more minutes to let others join, and then we'll get started.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our 28th webinar. This is our 28th webinar in the Coffee With series, sponsored by the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership at Seton Hall University. I'm Reggie Lewis, Executive Director of the Center, and it's great to greet all of you who've logged on today from places around the U.S. to take part in our conversation with the Dr. Charles Seifert, President of Siena College, and one of the most thoughtful and caring voices among university leaders in America today. I'll give a more formal intro on Dr. Seifert in a moment, but first a word about our coffee series and the center. The Coffee With series provides the center the chance to showcase the inspirational stories of servant leaders and the endless ways in which individuals and organizations can be transformed by the power of servant leadership, a philosophy in which the leader first seeks to serve. And I assure you, Dr. Seifert will not disappoint. For nearly 60 years, the Greenleaf Center has worked to promote the awareness, understanding, and practice of servant leadership. In addition to the Coffee With series, other core programs include the annual Public Policy Lecture, which features thought leaders and issue experts from a range of sectors who apply a servant leader's perspective to current public policy challenges. The Greenleaf Scholars Program funds researchers whose work promotes the efficacy and impact of servant leadership. We also expose high school and college students to opportunities to develop lives of service through our Next Generation initiative. And through our outside engagements, we proudly work closely with organizational partners as they implement the practice of servant leadership throughout their workplace culture. For example, next month, the center will host a cohort of midshipmen and emerging leaders from the U.S. Naval Academy who will spend the day with us here on campus learning about servant leadership. But now the moment we've all been waiting for. We really are thrilled to welcome today's guest, Dr. Charles Seifert, who was appointed the 13th president of Siena College on December 2nd, 2022. Before assuming the presidency of Siena, he served in a number of significant roles across the institution: Dean of the School of Business, Interim Vice President for Academic Affairs, founder and executive director of Siena's Institute for Leadership Development, department chair of Marketing and Management, and assistant dean of the School of Business. In addition to his administrative work, Dr. Seifert has taught at Siena for decades. When asked about his teaching philosophy, Dr. Seifert once stated, and I must say this is one of my favorite quotes from him, he said, "I consider myself very fortunate to have had the opportunity to provide guidance to and learn from our students. Some of my greatest accomplishments, he said, takes place when I have been fortunate enough to positively impact our students. Well, Dr. Seifert, I'm sure that all the students that have crossed your path are among the truly fortunate. And as if this impressive career in academia were not enough, Dr. Seifert has had a very successful career in banking and finance. He served as Chief Financial Officer of the Albany Colony Regional Chamber of Commerce. He also served as a Vice President of Evergreen Bank and a manager at the First American Bank. Dr. Seifert holds a BA in economics from the University of Buffalo, an MBA in finance from the Sage Graduate School, and a PhD in organizational studies with a specialization in leadership from the University at Albany. Well, Dr. Seifert, have you got your coffee on your end? Are you ready over there in Siena? you, we're not hearing you, but we're gonna there
There
you
we
go.
go. Yes, I'm down to 2 cups of coffee a day. Unfortunately, they're this size, but thank you, Reggie. Please call me Chuck. Change of title, not attitude. I'd appreciate that.
Of course.
It's absolutely my honor and my privilege to be here. And it's funny when you hear your life kind of told back to you in that fashion. But at the same time, Reggie, congratulations on being named New Jersey Educator Power 50. That's
Oh,
an absolutely wonderful accomplishment. You absolutely deserve it, and congratulations.
well, thank you, Chuck. The honor though goes to the center, but thank you so much, and thanks for allowing me to publicly call you Chuck. We'll struggle a little bit there. You are the president of Siena, but listen, let's jump right in, and we are really thrilled to have you.
Thank you.
And as we shared with you last week in our chat, we always like to begin with a couple of questions to give our audience a deeper sense of who our guest is. And so, would you tell us, well, tell folk where you grew up?
Yep, sure. So I was born in Ohio, outside of Cleveland. I only lived there till I was 5, so don't have too many memories of Ohio. Although my grandparents lived there, and we always went back and visited. Then I moved to Rockford, Illinois, and I lived there from 5 to 12 years old. And then moved to New Hartford, New York, which is right outside of Utica. Went to the University of Buffalo, then moved to Albany, and I've been here ever since.
So my graduate work, as you know, was in Illinois. I got to ask about Rockford. I mean, like, do you
Yeah,
remember some bone-chilling winters? Like, any
yeah,
thoughts about Rockford?
yeah, absolutely. I loved Rockford, and look, it's funny. There's some great things. First, few people, well, hopefully, some of the people at the meeting today will remember that Cheap Trick is from Rockford, Illinois. But a couple things. One thing, I was playing Little League baseball and Pop Warner football, so I was a Cubs and a Bears fan. I still am to this day, although I moved, my affiliations didn't. And I think being exposed to both the Cubs and the Bears has really helped my personal growth, my ability to deal with disappointment and rejection. But all in all, no, I think it's been a very positive situation. It was funny when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016. The local news channel actually came and interviewed me. I must have been the only Cubs fan that they knew, and the interview was great. But I did make one line, which I did think was pretty good, and that was, growing up 50 plus years, it was always, well, wait till next year. Well, there's always next year, and I said, well, next year finally came, right? And when they won the World Series, and that was fantastic. Another thing that Illinois in particular. Was a great time for like my family, right? So we had the pop-up camper, and we would go different places, and that was wonderful. I'm the youngest of 3 children. My sisters are 3 years and 6 years older. So right before we moved, my sister went to college, Murray State, And then we moved to New York. So, we kind of lost that whole family unit. And, I think that that's impacted me and my desire to make sure that that we stay close and stay connected with our family.
Absolutely. Nothing like a close-knit family.
Yeah.
One more quick question about the early years. So you and I share in common the distinction of being first gens.
Yeah, yeah.
And so just curious about your experience in applying for college, thinking about college, the kind of support you received or whatever. Tell our audience about what it was like in thinking about and planning for college.
Yeah, that's a great question, Reggie. So, all right, so I'll go into some detail on some of the different things. I probably wasn't the best high school student, right? I'll
That's
start.
hard to believe, Chuck.
Yeah, well, wait. So, and then, I am first gen. My sisters both went to college, but my parents didn't. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. Then I decided that I really did want to go to college. And so I went into my guidance counselor, and his name, is Mr. Noyes, was his name, and told him that I was really interested in pursuing a college education. And this is a true story. He said, you have a snowball chance in August of getting in a four-year school. And not a very nice thing to say, but I don't always put that much weight on other people's assessment of myself. So I went through, did the SATs, did fairly well on the SATs, applied, and was accepted at the University of Buffalo. Great school. And so I went in with my acceptance letter and said it, well, I actually threw it on his desk, and he looks at the letter and he goes, wow, if I'd have known that, I would have sent more applications there. So again, not very encouraging, but that's okay for me because I persevered. But I promise you, it hurts me to think of the multitude of people that followed his advice and didn't strive to be the best that they could be, right? And so I think that positive encouragement and really looking for the best in people and providing them what they need in order to be successful was instilled at me in a very young age. And I did try to actually track him down after I had finished my PhD and was faculty, and he had retired like a year before I went there. So I never got the opportunity to talk to him.
Well, let's you and I create a project and go find them. How about
All
that?
right. All right.
Obviously, you did go on and you persevered and it paid off. You studied finance and organizational studies, which prepared you for a rich background in banking and higher ed. I don't think a lot of people know about the banking piece.
Yeah.
What were some of your early thoughts and influential factors that determined your career path? You've had an interesting career path, Chuck.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're old, like me, you can look back and you can see these really distinct pivot points in your life, right? That really helped direct who you are and where you are. But when you're along that path, it's really hard to kind of see what those were, right? And to say that it was a convoluted career path is an understatement, to say the least, right? And I'm going to be somewhat controversial, and I'm going to say that I really am not a supporter of career paths, but let me explain. All right. Because I will tell you that some of the people that I know that are like not necessarily content with where they are people that followed a predetermined career path that they established at some point previously. And so I am an unbelievably huge proponent of goal setting. Goal setting works. And whenever I'm working with somebody, be it a student, be it a colleague, be it a peer, I always work and help them determine what their goals are, 1, 3, 5, 10, 25, and lifetime goals. And that's a absolutely wonderful exercise, but alone it is of no value, because what happens is that each time you get to one of those inflection points, You have to reevaluate where you are and what you're doing, and then change your actions to be consistent with your revised goals. So that for me was really a lot of those different pivot points. And I'll talk about one real quickly, which is going from the private sector to academia, right? I was vice president by 30, CFO by 34. Things were going good, right? And life changed. I started my family. My wife and I started our family. I was teaching as an adjunct at night after my MBA, and it just really lit an ember of just hope and I just love the opportunity to shape those minds and hopefully have a positive impact. And I was also lured by the flexibility of a faculty position. Clearly, it's the same amount of work, just when you do it is different, right? You can do it at 11 o'clock at night. You don't have to do it at 2 in the afternoon. And so I took the 1-year visiting position at Siena College in finance, and then pursued the PhD at Albany full time. So I was teaching full time and taking courses. So that was lots of fun. Um, but then I moved to management since my PhD was going to be in leadership. But that happened because I reevaluated what was important to me at that point in time. And that allowed me to then make that step, realize that my actions had to change in order to allow me to pursue that long term and continue on. Now, I'm sure that I would have been happy in banking or in finance, but I think that having that opportunity to move around really positively impacted me.
Look at that, which enabled you to positively impact thousands of others. And so let's talk a bit about your arrival at Siena as a visiting professor almost 30 years ago. You're not old. I would say you're seasoned. How about that? In fact, you've
like
still
that.
got all your hair, Chuck. That's not fair. You got more hair than me. Tell us, though, what initially and continues to attract you to Siena.
Yeah, so Siena is a special place, right? And again, remember, I started Siena because I love teaching, and that I didn't really understand what it meant to be a faculty member. And I apologize if you can hear a car horn. Can you hear that, Reggie?
No, you're good.
Okay, sorry. It's an alarm in the parking lot.
It's all right. It's the reality that we live with
Yeah,
these
I know.
webinars.
Yeah, but so I came just thinking about that teaching night, and I knew Siena, of course, right? I was in the Albany area. We have an unbelievably strong reputation, but I didn't really understand what Siena was really about. But almost immediately, I was just enthralled with the community approach and the impact and the emphasis on making sure that the students were taken care of and that student-centered focus. And it was absolutely wonderful. And I always talked about the secret sauce, right? That there's something in the water at Siena. I would even say things, Reggie, like, we can't fake it this good, right? There's something there. And it was years ago, but I realized that that secret sauce is really our Franciscan tradition and our Franciscan values, and we're not just a liberal arts college in the Catholic and Franciscan tradition, but we truly live out those Franciscan ideals. And some of those values, Reggie, are inclusivity, innovation, we're person-centered, lifelong learning, and this one, you ready? Compassionate leadership, which, by the way, is another word for servant leadership, right? And those values really resonate in absolutely everything that we do, and it's incredibly consistent across the board. And it really helps us be the institution that we are and the institution that I'm truly blessed to work for. And I say, I am truly blessed to be able to serve an organization that I love so much, because otherwise it'd be a lot of work. No, right. But it's a absolutely wonderful place, and the community is incredible.
Well, in a few minutes, we'll talk more about that community and how you all adhere to those Franciscan values. But I'm gonna use your word. I'm gonna pivot a bit to our second main category of questions to get some insights from your research in the area of leadership and just some general thoughts you have about servant leadership in today's times. Your PhD, as I shared with our audience, and research expertise are in the area of leadership, particularly as relates to the interaction between managers and or leaders and those they lead. You've given the field and all of us who care about leadership numerous scholarly articles on the subject. I wish I had time to get the top 10 findings, but if you would just hit on two key findings our audience really should know about, I think that would be great.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Two, huh? All right. No, I can do this. So, first, let me just, um, when I had the opportunity to study at the University at Albany, I had, unbelievably brilliant people that I had the opportunity to work with. And, very quickly I learned the greatest thing that I know is how little I know, right? The greatest thing I learned is how little I know. And I had the chance to work directly with Gary Uckel. He's one of the top 10 leadership minds in the world. I would argue top 5. And and he's the author of the #1 book that's used in graduate programs and PhD programs, master's and PhD. And if I told you that I know that book, that would be an understatement. I know that book, right? Gary was my dissertation chair. I worked with him extensively, and he's absolutely wonderful person, and I consider him a mentor and a friend. Just absolutely wonderful man. But look, you can classify leadership theories into 4 main categories: traits, behavior, contingency, and power and influence. And as you indicated, I did a lot of my research in power and influence, and all of those are really important. But there was always something missing from those different theories. And I can talk about a lot of the supporting research and a lot of the different areas. In fact, gentleman Stogdill, who's another one of those top 10 minds, made a statement once, and this is old, 1974, but he said, there are as many theories of leadership as there are people that have studied it.
Yeah.
Right? Which is true, because when you're studying or you're doing research in the area of leadership, you're defining that construct, which is leadership.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to come up with different ways in order to support it. And so I was always striving for one overriding principle, an umbrella that could fit over those other theories. Because, clearly a lot of those theories have practical implications, right? But what's that one overarching area? And you had mentioned in my bio, Reggie, that I was a founder for the Institute for Leadership Development at Siena. And Siena College is Franciscan. We have a friary on campus, and the head of the friary is called the Guardian. And the Guardian came to me and asked me if I wanted to do leadership training for all the Guardians in Holy Name Province. So that goes all the way from the Canadian border down to Florida. I said, absolutely, right? I'd love to. And so I started doing it, and then I'm like, I think I better figure out what it is these Guardians do, right? If I'm going to develop an effective program. And he used Father Dan Dwyer, and I'm paraphrasing. He said, we're responsible for the fiscal operation of the friary. Father Dan never used the word fiscal and operation together, but that's what he was getting at. And we're responsible for the emotional and spiritual development of all the friars. And Reggie, that was the silver bullet that I was looking for. And that's truly what led me to servant leadership. And I'm trying to look at a different way to not just work with or for an organization, but to make sure that that organization is better after you leave that organization. And I truly believe the second thing That was one. The second thing is how underrepresented servant leadership is in the leadership text. So I have a prop. Okay,
Okay,
this is Bass's Handbook of
look at
Leadership.
that.
Look at
Yeah,
it. Isn't that a beauty? First, I
yeah,
don't think handbook means what you think it means. It's more of an encyclopedia. Um, it has 2 paragraphs on servant leadership and 5 other references, right? This is Gary Uckel's book, not the most recent edition, sorry, but Gary Uckel's book has 1 page on servant leadership. And so I think part of our responsibility is to make sure, to get up on the rooftop and to shout out the impact, the positive impact that servant leadership and its principles can really have on organizations and on the people within those organizations.
absolutely. Which is why we have iconic leaders like yourself on this series to help us shout out and champion this impactful way of leading, managing, supporting others. And your first reference, your first point really speaks to Robert Greenleaf's invitation for all of us to assume the best test, to leave people uh, healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous.
Right.
You brought that spirit of servant leadership into your inauguration. Your theme was leading the way together, a call to serve.
Yeah.
Tell us how you integrated servant leadership into the inauguration. That
Yeah.
had to be fun.
It was everywhere. So um, I was presented with the opportunity to provide someone with an honorary degree. And the recommendation was somebody that was highly impactful in my life. Um, I didn't think that the most impactful person is Deb, my wife, but I didn't think it was, appropriate to give her an honorary degree. So when I told you the story about the Franciscan friars and the Guardians, it led me to a book called The Servant by James Hunter. If you haven't read it, I'm sure you've read
Yep.
it. The other people on this meeting, if they haven't read it, I would encourage them to do so. It's a great book. I had done some work with James Hunter 25 years ago, again with my statistics and trying to validate his measure of servant leadership, because I felt we could, work together and try to do some of those different things. And it didn't work out. That's okay. But we did do a lot of analysis, so he at least knew who I was. And I called him up and spoke to him and told him that, from a leadership perspective, he had the greatest influence on me as an individual. And I would like to repay that with providing him an honorary degree. And in perfect servant leader fashion, he agreed. Right. I can imagine what Jim Hunter can charge an organization to do a presentation and consulting. He did not charge us. He just came and he served. We did a symposium the night before, and he led that symposium on servant leadership. And then during my inauguration, he gave a keynote speech as well. So it was just
Fantastic.
absolutely wonderful. One other thing I just want to, just for a fun thing, with my inauguration, other people help support me as well. And people know me well. I've been here for a long time. And at the conclusion of my inauguration, we had a 4-piece brass band that played Led Zeppelin Kashmir as I departed from the inauguration. So they served me well by meeting me near and dear to my heart. But I will bet that I am the only president that recessed to Led Zeppelin Kashmir.
Yeah, so you set the tone early on, Chuck.
That's right. Yeah.
Uh, but in terms of day-to-day operations, share with our audience, how you live out, how your administration incorporates servant leadership values with respect to dealings with the administration. I mean, Siena reflects, like all of our institutions, these bureaucratic environments, however well-intentioned folk are. So what does that look like with respect to the administration, but also faculty and, your core constituency, my core constituency, our students? Speak
Yeah.
about that if you would.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. This is the crux of it, right? This is what does it mean to aspire to be a servant leader. And I promise you that I aspire to be a servant leader. I know that I am not. I fall short all the time, but I always try to do better. And I learn from my shortcomings and try to improve those moving forward. So, that's really, really important to understand, is that it is a lifelong process of trying to serve better. Look, obviously there are a myriad of different tenets associated with servant leadership, and I promise you I could spend the rest of our time and a bunch more talking about those different principles. But a couple that I'd like to highlight that I think really are fundamental to a lot of the other principles. And the first one is really, really easy, but incredibly difficult at the same time. And that is honesty, right? Complete candor. And it is so important that each and every time you have the opportunity to engage an audience, that you do so in a completely honest and forthright way. I tell people that I will tell them the truth. Even if I can't tell you, I'll tell you that I can't tell you instead of make something up, right? Because there are things that I can't tell everybody everything all the time, but I'll tell them that. And once you have that trust that's associated with having, just candor,
Yes.
radical candor, in making sure that you're conveying that information, then people are more likely to listen to the information and respond to the information as compared to trying to come up with ways to find out if it's not true, right? So that takes a long time, and it has to be done over and over and over again as you're moving forward. Another area that personally I try very hard to do is effectively listen. Right? Sounds easy too, doesn't it? But in order to listen, I have to listen to understand,
Yes.
as compared to refute. And far too often, people will formulate a response to a question before the question is even asked. And to me, that's the worst thing you can do, because clearly you're not listening to me if you're already interrupting me and answering the question before I'm done, right? So, but that takes time, and it's important. And what's really important that I think we could all learn a lesson from is, in particular, listen to people you disagree with, or listen to people that have a view that's different than your own. And don't try to use your influence to convince them that you're right. Use your skills in order to listen, to understand the perspective that they're coming from. And I think we would all benefit greatly from that. Another one is empathy.
Yes.
Right, Reggie, sympathy is easy. I can
Right.
feel sorry for you, right? I'm sorry you broke your foot, right? I'm sorry, whatever, But to be truly empathetic is really, really hard. And in order to do that, you have to understand that people have been affected by various different types of situations, and all of those situations have led them to who they are now. So really trying to understand it from their perspective helps you design a way in order to help them be successful, as compared to saying, well, this is what worked with me, I'm sure that it would work with you, right? So obviously that's really important. And then the last one that I'll just touch on is, I'm only successful if the people that I work with are successful. And so my job is to do everything that I can to meet their needs and also help them be successful. Going back to the textbooks, right? Path goal theory of leadership is determine what their goals are and clear the path in order to allow them to be able to obtain those particular goals. And that is a really, really important characteristic. And making sure that at Siena, we have something that we've instituted from the cabinet level that's called Siena, our first team, right? Or putting Siena first. And that's making sure that everything that we do furthers the mission of Siena College before it furthers the individual or departmental objectives.
Okay.
And that's really important. One last thing is you had mentioned about the students. We meet the students where they are and do everything that we can in order for them to be successful. So we understand that the students also come from a myriad of different backgrounds and perspectives, have different aptitudes and different abilities, and we need to do what we can in order for all of them to be successful.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Radical candor,
Yeah.
listening to understand instead of listening to refute, empathy, and the Siena first approach, particularly with respect to the needs of students, refreshing, a refreshing leadership approach. And so that it's no wonder then, which is a nice segue to my next question, because you all have received some really, really good news. So kudos goes to you and your team as you continue to put Siena first. And this was recognized in the recent Wall Street Journal College Pulse's annual survey,
Yeah.
where Siena advanced 21 places in the rankings compared to prior years. And so I understand that Siena is now ranked in the 69th spot,
Yeah.
drum roll, placing it in the top 2% of all colleges and universities nationwide.
Yeah.
Brag about that a little bit.
So yeah, I'm humble, but it's so I'm gonna show you one more real quick. I'm sorry. I didn't plan on this one. Um you're not gonna be able to read it.
Yeah, just
It's okay. It says putting the loud in Loudonville. We're located in Loudonville, New York. So we do need to ask permission to brag a little bit. So thank you for bringing that up, and yeah, please allow me to. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic if you think about it. The top 2% of all colleges and universities in the country. Last year, we were in the top 3% and we were ecstatic, and now we're in the top 2%. And so, just like anything, you look at those numbers and you try to figure out what is it that really sets Siena apart. And I give credit in particular to the Wall Street Journal Pulse poll, because what they're looking at is student outcomes. They're looking at students who graduate in 4 years. They're looking at their ability to start or develop their career, go on to graduate school. They're looking at the amount of time that it takes to repay their loans based both on debt and income. And they're looking at student satisfaction, right? So a lot of the different polls look at the quality of the students coming in, and the Wall Street Journal poll looks at the quality of the students as they leave the institution. And I would argue that that is the most important metric that we could possibly focus on, is what transformation occurs from the students when they come to Siena and when they graduate from Siena. And those are absolutely the areas that we focus on and we work on. And Reggie, I always say that a lot of our rankings are just an indicator of all the work that we do, right? It doesn't just happen. And our focus on the students and on the students' success the providing them with hands-on opportunities to apply information, not just rote memorization, right? Opportunities to get out into the field and work with professionals over their time here really, really has a positive impact. Reggie, I live on campus, and most days, including today, I drive a golf cart from my house to campus, and I pick up students all the time. I love it. And I always ask them what your major, your year, and a pain point and a pride point, right?
Mm.
And always when they're a senior, they go, I'm a senior, right? They're sad that their experience is about to come to an end, right? So I tell them they can do their masters, right? So, but we have that, that positive impact where we engage people in the community. They're part of the community. They know that they have the support to be successful, and then they are successful. So one more real quick one. We are also the #1 school in New York State for getting a job after graduation 3 years in a row. So, you put those two together, there's a lot of value associated with the Siena education.
Absolutely. And so just the additional bragging rights with respect to the social mobility
Right.
of your
Absolutely.
students. That's just tremendous. And kudos to you and your team, Chuck,
Thank you.
for that great work. Of course, I'm getting nudged by my very young team here to wrap it up this first portion, but I've got two final questions in this first portion. I gotta ask, which is something you probably get all the time in your travels, a question about the college's impressive polling apparatus.
Yeah.
So would you speak to the dynamics around producing sometimes highly sensitive election data
Yeah. Yeah.
while protecting the institution from becoming too embroiled in political controversy, which we seem to have a lot of these days?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, again, it's hard for me, but I'm going to, we're the #1 most accurate poll in the country. Right. But yeah, we have been very, very successful, and it's a very active period right now, obviously. The most important part of our polling is that it is a completely separate entity. It is not, I have zero influence.
So
Probably
there's independence.
completely independent. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I probably have negative influence, Reggie, right? If I asked, they would know. But that's really important if you think about it, because they have to be, just like when I'm talking about my own emphasis on honesty, they have to have that integrity. They have to make sure that they're doing what's necessary in order to get the best possible information out there. So being independent, I can always say, well, those are the numbers, right? And they're doing what they need to in order to, again, provide valid and accurate results. And, those are the numbers.
Wow. Excellent. And we're all enriched by these numbers.
Yeah, hopefully, yes.
Lastly, you could look at our times today in America, and you could take on a very pessimistic perspective with respect to polarization in our public discourse, which seems to be pervasive throughout our public discourse. But if you could talk about flipping that narrative for us to adopt a more optimistic outlook, what would that be? What would be a way forward?
Yeah, servant leadership. No, look, the I've done a bit of work on generational differences, right? And there are differences in the generations for sure, and the way that they perceive things. But I promise you, I am incredibly optimistic about this generation. They spend too much time on their phones. All right. All right. But our parents probably said they spend too much time listening to Led Zeppelin Cashmere. No, right? No. But look, the reality is, I think their level of understanding of social responsibility
Mhm.
and their understanding of truly appreciating individual differences is greater than in any time in my lifetime. And so I think providing them with the necessary guidance and feedback and input and information regarding about what it really means to be a servant would resonate incredibly well with the with the current generation.
Excellent. Thank you, Chuck, for
No.
indulging me for this portion of the program. I am pleased to now bring on Gabby Cooper, our project manager here,
Hi, Gabby.
who's going to facilitate the Q&A portion of our program to our guests. Continue to load up that Q&A feature to feed some questions to Chuck. Of course, I could talk to Chuck all day, but I'm being compelled by these Gen Zs who outnumber me here, Chuck,
Yeah.
to now flip it over.
All right, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie, and thank you, Dr. Seifert, for being here with
You
us.
can call me Chuck too, you know, right?
Thank you. All right. So our first question from the audience reads, you mentioned how you always try to be truthful when it comes to leading a team and working with others. Why do you believe telling the truth is so important when it comes to practicing servant leadership?
Wonderful. So, wow, great question. Did James Hunter send that? No, I'm just kidding. That's a great question. So let me go into more detail, because this is actually one of the hardest parts about servant leadership, and one of the parts that really adds a lot of value to this. An important part of being honest is making sure that when an individual doesn't perform at the level that they should be performing at, or the level that is meeting expectations, you need to make sure that they know that, right? Otherwise, you're empowering poor performance and you're actually stealing from the organization. So having to be brutally honest, but respectful, right? And in a developmental way is really, really important for servant leadership. So you need to meet the needs of the individuals that you're serving. And in order to truly meet their needs, that you have to provide them with that honest and candid assessment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that honesty will sometimes wake those up who need a little bit of a wake-up call. Yeah. Okay. Our next question is, how do you challenge leadership without getting into trouble?
Um, what do you, well, let's see, how do I challenge leadership without getting into trouble?
It came from an anonymous person, so yeah.
Yeah, so let me, I hopefully will answer the question that the individual is asking. So maybe from this conversation, you realize that I am completely transparent. I am who I am, warts and all, right? And people know what's important to me. I try to stay consistent in my actions. And I think by, again, having my actions be consistent with my intentions most of the time, no, the vast majority, I think helps keep me out of trouble in some of those different situations. Does that make sense? Right? So if I say that my responsibility is to make sure that others are put ahead of myself, and yet I take action that benefits me over them, then I've lost all credibility and I'm certainly going to be in trouble, and people aren't going to follow other initiatives that I'm trying to undertake. So it's being consistent, and it is being completely transparent and open, and sometimes laughing at yourself too, right?
Yeah, thank you. All right. Our next question is, what's your sense of how the values and principles of servant leadership resonate with today's generation of students?
Yeah, great. Honestly, I believe they resonate incredibly well. I alluded to this earlier in the fact that the students, the individuals today, the younger generation are more attuned to social responsibility, the environmental crisis, and individual differences than any other generation that I'm aware of. And you know, look, being uh, being respectful, being kind, being gracious, listening, being supportive, not passing judgment, all of those types of things should resonate across generations and across different spaces.
Yeah, it's that caring mindset that
That's right.
we all need. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you might have touched on this with your answer about being truthful, but maybe there's other advice you could give. So, as a leader, what advice do you give to students or young leaders who are struggling academically or unsure about their future career, where they're going?
Great, great, great. All right. No, totally different. So first and foremost is to do a self-evaluation, right?
Mm,
When I'm doing executive coaching or consulting, I don't do that now. I have other things that take my time. But the first thing I do is I identify where someone is and where they want to be, identify the resulting gap, and then do what I can in order to make sure that we can fill in that gap. Okay.
mhm,
A lot of times, especially if we're looking at when I'm talking or working with students, they are pursuing something because they thought that's what they wanted to do, or someone told them that's what they should do,
mm,
right?
yeah.
It's important for them to do that self-evaluation and to really spend some time and think about what is it that I want to do 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15, 25, and lifetime. Okay. And identify those different goals and those different objectives, and then work with somebody that is at that, let's say the 5 year out.
Mhm,
What did they do in order to get there? And then determine the actions that they need to do in order to do that as well. But Gabby, and I did say this earlier, but it's certainly worth emphasizing. Absolutely unequivocally make sure that you reassess your goals each and every time you reach one of those thresholds, because I
mhm,
promise you that's what's going to help you have long-term contentment, or even call it self-actualization,
mm,
is by making sure that you're responding to changes in your life and changes in the world around you, and changing that path going forward. Look, it's not easy. It's stressful, it's challenging, and it's not necessarily fun, right? But the reality is the long-term benefit of doing that planning will outweigh the the process of going through it.
yeah, I think taking a look at the goals you've had and the where you wanna be in the future, it's okay that those goals change, like, things
They
happen
will,
and yeah, they
right?
will.
Yeah, look at me, right?
Mm, yeah.
Bachelor's in economics, master's in finance, and
Mhm,
PhD in organizational studies. I think I know what I want to do when I grow up, but I'm not quite sure. No, no, right? You know, it's good. It changes. It really, really does. So being responsive to that's what's really important. And
yeah,
and you know, again, look, if I look at it from my perspective, you can't. It is a big deal. I understand that you know, someone that says it's not a big deal is wrong, because it is a big deal.
mhm.
Just spend the time and the energy necessary to develop your best plan, understanding that it will change.
Yeah, okay, so we have time for one more question. It reads, "Curious to hear about advice or tips you have for those of us in the older generations, quote, to
Yeah.
promote and name servant leadership alongside the newest in the workforce."
All right. So do it. Right. It doesn't matter generational regarding the implementation of servant leadership. Okay. I have had unbelievable success in having people respond to the servant leadership model. I will be perfectly candid and say that, you know what, it doesn't, not everyone does adopt the principles of servant leadership. And you know what, that's okay too. And it's really the principle of the 10%. So let's say, just by chance, that 10% of the people that you work with don't get the servant model, don't buy into it. So why deprive the 90% that do because of the 10% that don't, right? So
Mhm.
focus on the benefit to the larger population and make sure that you give them the best possible experience that you can, and understand that it's not a panacea, right? It's not going to work for
Mhm.
everyone, but it is really important to provide those opportunities to the other people.
Yeah, that is very true. All right, so before we let you go, I want to say thank you so much, but we do have a few announcements for everyone in our audience. So I'm gonna share here. So our next Foundations of Servant Leadership course that starts on October 16th has open registration right now. So you could use the QR code on the screen to access registration, or it's also linked to our homepage at greenleaf.org. We'd also like to invite you to join our Hall of Fame ceremony on October 16th in celebration of local and national servant leaders who are leaving impacts within their communities. So if you visit greenleaf.org, you could reserve your seat, meet the honorees, become a sponsor, and purchase an ad in our ceremony journal. If you would like to stay connected to the Greenleaf Center, you could use these QR codes to follow what we have to offer. And all of our updates are posted on these platforms. And lastly, thank you all to everybody who joined in our audience today. If you could please take a moment to take the brief Zoom survey that will pop up when the webinar is complete. We will deeply appreciate it. We look at your feedback. So thank you all so much. And thank you so much, Chuck, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. The Siena community is truly fortunate to have you at the helm. You have enriched us today in our conversation with you. Please come back, and we'll try and Gabby get in a little bit more time to get in maybe 10 of Chuck's findings from his research.
Look, absolutely my pleasure. Again, I love this. I love the opportunity to talk about it, and I've truly enjoyed your company. So thank you both so much. I appreciate it.
Take good care. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.